Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 795. Today we're going to talk about Risk Dune. This is a new game from Hasbro and the Op that's just come out. And what this is not your typical Risk game. It's more along the kin of the Risk Star Wars edition that came out, gosh, probably 8-9 years ago at this point. I'm not sure exactly. And that was like this game, a two-player head-to-head game, although you can play this game and that Risk Star Wars Edition 4-player, which is 2 versus 2 in a team. And then that Star Wars game and this game's design, it's sort of a descendant of an older game, which is long on a print, called Star Wars Queen's Gambit, kind of a Grail game. Basically, Queen's Gambit was sort of a representation of Episode 1, Phantom Menace. Star Wars Risk is kind of a representation of Return of the Jedi, and this, of course, is kind of a representation of the probably more or less the second Dune movie, if I had to really split hairs about it. But you know, it's a representation of the battle on Arrakis in Dune. So let's go down to the table. I will say this up front. A little bit of a spoiler. I think this game's a lot of fun, which is why I was getting the video. But there's a couple of things that are a little bit loosey-goosey. Now there's a somewhat official how-to video. It's there on the Board Game Geek page if you want to go search for it. I'm not sure if it's technically official, but I know the guy was sponsored by Hasbro to make the instructional video. That video has some clarifications in the rules. You know, just kind of, frankly, just some nuance that didn't really affect gameplay, but there's a couple of other things that kind of affect gameplay, but not too much in my practice with the game. But I just want to bring it up because I think people will run into it. So when I go to do the walkthrough, I'll recommend to go watch his video. Again, it's on Board Game Geek. It's the how to play that's up there. And then but I'll give you the how to play here, and then talk a little bit about the wiggly room of some of the rules, and then I'll talk more about that in the review. But just so you know, I still enjoy the game, but there's a couple of caveats. Okay, I've got the game here set up as it might look at the beginning of the game. One player will sit on this side. This is the fighters, the Paul Muad'Dib and Atreides side. Over here we've got the oppressors. This is Fade Routha's standee there. Here's Paul. And they have some of their troops and stuff over there in these different sectors. We'll zoom in a little bit. So the objective of Paul and his team is to get here, invade Arrakeen, and then slay Fade Routha. And then you can see there's two types of troops. Both sides have two types of troops. You've got the Harkonnens in blue, and then you have the Sardaukar in gray. All of that it means is that you can kill a Harkonnen troop with a 4+, Sardaukar you can kill with a 5+, a little bit harder to kill. And when you move a Sardaukar, they can actually move 2 of these zones here. Now there are some steps that need to happen before Paul and the Fremen and the Fedaykin can actually assault Arrakeen and then slay Fade Routha. There's some steps they have to do before they can make that attack. Fade Routha, this figure here, will not move around. This is sitting there just kind of as a token piece there. You need a 6 to kill Fade Routha at the end of the game when you do combat. However, if there are other troops in here, they all have to be eliminated first before you can actually kill Fade Routha. And then you can see on the board here, you've got the starting amount of troops at setup. And then down here, you can see we start with some Fedaykin and Fremen troops in red. Paul starts here. And the Fremen and Fedaykin are similar. Fremen you can kill on a 4+, Fedaykin on a 5+. Paul is only killed or conquered or defeated on a 6+, but when Paul is defeated, he goes back to this spot here. Now the way that the opposing player, the oppressors, win is if they destroy these sieges. So you can see there's 2 sieges that start in the game. There are 2 more that can come into play, and you can see the silhouettes of the shapes will show up here on the board. They can come into play, and then they will act as respawn points for the Fedaykin and the Fremen units. So you can respawn them in any siege that's available. Of course, the Harkonnens can destroy the sieges. Once those sieges are destroyed for the particular type, you can never respawn those troops. However, when the Harkonnen and Sardaukar players' troops are killed, they are removed from the game permanently. There's no way for them to come back. However, let's just zoom out a little bit here. You can see these different tracks here. So this track, the Fremen player, Muad'Dib, will be going up that track. And then since the Harkonnen player will be sitting here, they'll be coming up this track in this direction. As you come up this track, this will have little spots in here where you will respawn troops in Arakeen there. So this space is the only place that has like a maximum number of troops. You can have up to 10 either Harkonnen or Sardaukar units. So if you have to spawn some and there's no room, they just don't come in. So you want to keep them, moving out of there. So, because you are going to spawn some up, so you want to keep them moving forward. And in a similar way down here, you want to keep these troops out of here, because once these get destroyed, any troops that are on there are permanently destroyed. And then again, it removes kind of a respawn point there for that. Now, how does the game work? Okay, so I gave you kind of the objective there. Basically, do some steps, get to Arakeen, defeat Feyd-Rautha. The steps for the Harkonnen players basically destroy everything. Destroy all the sieges, then you have no more respawns. Once you destroy all the sieges, then you got to destroy Paul, and then he has nowhere to respawn, technically. So each side has their own deck of cards. Here's the Oppressor deck. And similar to Star Wars Risk and Queen's Gambit, you're going to have a hand of 6 cards. Each round, each player is going to choose 3, put them in a certain order, put them face down, and then always starting with the Oppressor player, you're going to reveal the top card, and then you're going to be able to choose one of these options here. So sometimes it'll like double up, so you can just do this action twice, and so on. And some of these actions won't really be available until you move up your indicated track here. So let's just quickly go through some of these cards. So here is obviously you can activate Sardaukar troops, you can activate Harkonnen troops twice, you can go up the Oppression track, which is the Oppressor player's track over there, which I'll explain. You can activate a Dreadnought. The Dreadnought has to come out by going up the track, but then you can start to destroy the sieges that way. And it's worth noting that the Harkonnen player has two of these cards, which is you do the Dreadnought action, but instead of rolling 2 dice, you roll 4. Well, I'll explain how you do that. So you have 2 of these that you can do, and so you want to make sure you time those correctly, because there's some other little benefits and stuff that you can do. And then let's just take a quick look at the Fremen side. First of all, you got the Fedaykin, the Atreides, and the Fremen here. So the Fremen is the Fremen troops, Fedaykin, and then the Atreides is basically where Paul is. When you activate the Atreides, it's a little bit different. So typically when you activate a set, so if you activate Fremen, you can do them, or you can do the Fedaykin. Now if Paul's with either, he can go with them when you move, but if you activate the Atreides, he can also jump 2 spaces and take nobody with him, or he can go 1 space and then take troops with him in that case. And then there also is some bonuses later in the game if you activate them with the Atreides ability. So we'll get to that in a minute. Then you have the Vision track, which is the Atreides track here. That's how you activate that. And then finally you have the ability that you have to unlock moving up the track here of using the Thumper, which will call this little worm token here to come out and attack the opposing team's troops. So like I said, each team has a hand of 6 cards. And then you choose 3, put them in the order that you want, and then you reveal them back and forth, and then that's the end of the round. And then you draw back up to 6, and then you just keep playing until one of the sides has a victory. So when you activate the troops, so let's say you play a Fedaykin card, or in this case a Harkonnen card, and you activate them, you choose any region that you've got here, and then you can pull in all of the troops going across like so. And then at that point, whatever region that they move into, then you can attack out of to any adjacent region. So if we had some Fedaykin here, let's just put them like that. And then we pulled up and we had, let's say some Sardaukar was here, right? So we can activate the Sardaukar. Remember, the Sardaukar can move 2 spaces, so they could go 1, 2, and then they would be in here. And then from that point, you can attack with any troops that are in that spot, but you have always a cap of 5 dice that you roll. So in this case, we got way more than 5. We'd roll our 5 dice. Fedaykin are killed on a 5 or 6, so that's enough to kill these. We got a very good roll in that case. And the attacker chooses how they want to assign those. If Paul was there, the 6 could even be used to defeat him and push it back. So it's basically very simple. You pick whatever type of troop, you can move that type of troop or activate that type of troop, and then everybody in the region that they end up can then fight. So you don't actually have to move either, because you could play, a Harkonnen action there and just choose that and don't move with them and just activate and just have a combat there. So that's like, 60-70% of the game is picking a troop type, activating them, and then you attack it to adjacent regions. You don't ever share spaces with troops there. Now, like I said, on the Atreides side, you can also activate the Atreides. So Paul can move up to 2 spaces by himself, so he could like arrive in a spot and then attack. And then he can also carry troops with him as he attacks. But he'll also get a bonus later in the game, which will make his attacks more powerful. Now, Paul by himself will add 2 dice to the combat, so he doesn't need to have a whole big entourage with him because he's already bringing 2 dice. So at most, I mean, it's nice to have extras there for defense and acting as a buffer, but then you just add dice for the rest of your troops there. So it's still capped at 5 dice that way. Once you go up these different tracks, so again, this track here, which I'll explain how these tracks work, but on the Harkonnen side, the main thing you're worried about is activating this Dreadnought, and that because there's the Dreadnought ability on the cards. Once you have the Dreadnought in play, the rules would say put it here like by Arakeen, just to signify that you've activated it. You can tell because you'll have moved up so far in the track anyway, so the token's sort of superfluous. And then when you play Dreadnought action, then you will choose one of the target sieges here, roll 2 dice, and then on a 6, that siege will be destroyed. Any troops on there will be permanently destroyed. And then, that's your 1 step towards victory. Now remember, I said you can get those 2 special cards where you can actually roll 4 dice where you need a 6. But if you go further up the track, you can start to unlock these extra +1s. And so you only can get 4 of these in the game. And before you roll, you can choose to apply these to your roll. So this is good to kind of combo up with the one that makes you roll 4 dice, because then you don't need a 6, you could have a 4 or 5 if you spend these. So you want to be pretty choosy about how you do those. So that's the other card that's in the deck for the Harkonnen. On a similar sense, you have the Thumper cards, which allow you to activate the Sandworm. And so what you do is you just pick a spot here. We can just say, well, we're going to pick that spot and target that. And in this case, you also roll 2 dice. The rule book has a typo, I think, in the table, because there's a table here on the one page that tells you everybody's attack values and all that stuff. That says you actually roll 3, but in the quote-unquote official video, as well as the rules in the text, it says to roll 2 dice, and it makes sense because it's kind of paired with the Dreadnought. Anyway, you roll 2 dice here, and then on a 5 or 6, you will actually defeat every enemy troop that's in that spot. However, that player can also get to a spot on their track where they unlock these 3 warning vessels here. And so these are spotters, worm sign spotters. So when you activate that spot on the track, you can put these out in 3 different spots on the board, and then anything that's adjacent to it, which you can pretty much cover the whole board at the beginning, they get a chance to have some of those troops evade. Now this is where the rulebook gets a little bit unclear. So let's say this action, I've got these laid out here. And so the way it would normally work is if I say, okay, I'm targeting this spot, I'm gonna try to roll a 5 or 6. I whiffed, okay? So at that point, the way that it seems to me, based on the rules in the videos, is you don't actually have to activate those to evade because this missed. But do you leave the Sandworm there? Because it seems like a very extra piece just to say, this is the spot that I'm attacking, which is fine. It's a little bit cool. It's a plastic mini, whatever. But if you do succeed, let's say I roll a 5 or 6, what happens is then that player will remove one of these worm sign spotters from an adjacent spot, and then they will roll a die, and then, oh, that was a good roll, and then that many of these troops will go back to Arakeen. So you kind of save them, they're not removed from the game permanently. But it doesn't tell you what to do with Sandworm token after, or what happens when you fail. So if I rolled that as a Sandworm, I failed, nobody gets eaten, but it doesn't say remove that from the board. And you also cannot move into regions with an enemy piece. And if you look at the rules, this classifies it as an enemy piece because the Fremen kind of own this. They sort of control the Sandworms. Now, if you leave it there, that acts as kind of an interesting sort of blocker, for movement, because they have to move around that. But if you fail, do you still leave it there? Even if you succeed, do you still leave it there? I don't know. It kind of makes sense it's just kind of a glorified little piece to say I'm targeting that, just to sort of declare, and that's all it is, and then it comes off the board. That's what I think happens. And that seems to make the most sense because Sandworms don't just hang out. They're always on the move. They're like sharks. So, they're just always swimming. So to the next Thumper, the next sort of rhythmic vibration. That's where they're going. So I think it's just to mark that. So I found that a little bit confusing that, okay, what do you do with that piece? So anyway, that's just a little bit of a rules thing. The other rules sort of caveat is, let's say, you had moved some pieces into here, like so. Okay, so now these guys are adjacent to a siege. Can you attack into a siege? I don't think so. It doesn't make a lot of sense, because if I attack into the siege, these guys are just going to respawn into the siege, right? Because they respawn. These guys respawn. There's not, they don't get removed. So I don't think you can attack. I don't think you would attack anyway. It'd be dumb. But it doesn't clarify that. Now, the one thing that brings it up interestingly here is this is where Paul comes back to spawn. These other guys, they come back into the sieges, right? The rules tell you to respawn Paul there, when he gets defeated. But you're not supposed to have enemy pieces in the same spot. So, but if enemies have moved in here, where do you put Paul? I think that's probably a typo. I think Paul's supposed to respawn into a siege. He starts out here kind of ahead of the game, a little bit into the field. But once he's defeated, I think you should get penalized a little bit. He goes back into a siege. Otherwise, why would the rule be, if there's no siege for Paul to spawn into, then, you know what I mean? Like, that makes sense, because you kill him, there's nowhere for him to spawn, and then, okay, you win the game. If you put him here, this little rule thing. So I think this is a little bit of a typo, though. Paul he starts here, but he goes back into a siege. I think that's the easiest way to interpret that. Other than that, I had one or two issues that I had with the rule book, but the other video clarified them for me, so it was no big deal. And like I said, these are no big deal either. I think this is self-explanatory, but it's just like, it doesn't tell you what to do with that piece. And I think this is just a mistake. This is a mistake that when Paul gets defeated, he goes there. He must go back to a siege. That makes way more sense than just going to some random desert spot. Okay, so let's talk about the tracks, because you're going to go up either the vision track or the Harkonnen track on that side. So whether you're doing the vision action as the Atreides or the oppression action as the Harkonnen player, you're always just going to take and roll 5 dice every time, and then you're just going to roll those dice up and then take a look. So you have a token on your side, in this case the Atreides player. You need a 2 to advance there. So okay, we'll spend the 3, that's higher. 2, let's spend the 4, and then 2 5s, bang bang. So we rolled way over our weight there. This 1 is useless. So you just keep moving up here. Now as you hit these special spots, you're going to actually stop. So even if I'd rolled 5 6s, I'd go 1 2 3 and stop, because once you get to these big boxes, you stop, and then that's the end of your action, no matter how much dice you have left. So on the Atreides side, you're going to start implementing and attaching these sieges here. You can see the spot for the siege. So in this case, I would go and grab this guy here, which you can see there has some extra troops. So this is a way to get extra troops, and you have extra sieges in there to spawn from, and that's extra targets that the Harkonnen player has to destroy. So as we're going up the track here, you can see you get the other siege in here with the Fedaykin. This is where you get Thumper, so now you can start calling the sandworms. Here is you get the Lady Jessica token, and this has a special ability written on the back, which is kind of nice. So this is choose one. At the end of the round, move a group of Fremen or Fedaykin to an adjacent region. So you get like a free move, which is very useful. Or you can discard up to 3 cards. Like if the hand that you have left over after the round doesn't look good, you can discard and then you can draw back up to 6. So it's very useful. This is just, certainly don't ignore that. And then we're going to move a little further here. Here we get Gurney Halleck. And then this one here, you put this with Paul, or you can just put it on the side, but it's good to put with him. So you get +1 to all dice when Paul and his friends attack. But that's only when you activate it with the Atreides action. If you activate them with Fedaykin or Fremen action, they don't get the +1. But with the Atreides, you get the +1, which is huge. I mean, that's just going to make attacking much easier. So you get that here. The next thing is interesting. So you have to, as the Atreides side, and this other video clarifies this nicely, is you have to get all the way to the top. So you got to get your token all the way to the top. And so if you have, first you have to get here to unlock the family atomics. So when you get there, you're going to put this out on a random spot on the board, which I'll show you. And then you have to get to here, which then allows you, once you've got the atomics, you can effectively, spoiler alert, blow a hole in the shield wall and then swarm into Arrakeen and kill everybody. But what if Paul is eliminated from the game? Because you could have all your sieges eliminated, have Paul eliminated, but still have a bunch of troops on the board. Because remember, the Harkonnen player has to kill everything, all troops, all sieges. So you can collect the family atomics without Paul. But if you have Paul still alive, Paul has to be the one to collect it. That's clarified much better in the video than it is in the rulebook. And similarly, if you've got the atomics before or after Paul's dead, then you can still complete the mission. So like his vision or whatever, his message is carried to the people, and they can still win the game. So you can still win the game without Paul. Okay, just so we're clear on that. So again, once you get to this spot, you're going to roll 1d6, and then we're going to just scooch over to the board here. You can see these spaces here with numbers. So let's say I rolled a 4. This would go here. Okay, now there could be troops here. And so before you collect that, you have to defeat all of these troops like so. And then on your turn, you can move in and then you collect that. Now, once there are no troops here, troops cannot then move back in. So once you've defeated who was there, who was kind of guarding the spot for whatever reason, then the enemy player can't move in there until you've taken that. So again, once you've got that and then you move to the top of the track, then you can start assaulting Arakeen from an adjacent spot there. So now let's look at the Harkonnen track. Okay, as you move up this track, again, here you're going to see some troop spawns. So here you can put 5 Harkonnens, because it's because of blue diamond. These go right into Arakeen. Always troops are going into Arakeen. So again, you want to keep troops moving out of there because you're going to start adding them. And if there's no room to put them, you can't put them in. So then we go up here, we get 5 more troops, and then we get the Dreadnought, which is here. So then this becomes available, and you can start bombing the sieges. Here's Lady Fenring, similar to Lady Jessica. She's got an ability, a little bit different. It says choose one. Have your opponent shuffle their order cards. So that happens at the beginning of the round. Because remember, you always go first as the oppressor. And so they may have a specific order that they're trying to play things in. And that will be important towards the end of the game. At the beginning of the game, it's not a big deal. But you can make them shuffle their order because they may want to do things in a certain order of operations. Or at the end of your turn, discard 3 cards at the end of the round, similar to Lady Jessica. So that becomes available. Again, don't sleep on her. And then these spots, you can see there's like the little silhouette around there, a little outline. This is where you start to get those +1 tokens to add to your Dreadnought's ability. You don't have to stop on these like you do the big ones, but again, there's 4 of these up here. And then here we get the worm sign tokens. You get all 3 of these. You get some more troops in. We'll go up here. Now we start to add the Sardaukar troops because the Emperor shows up here, and then at the top one up there again. So just more troops and then more +1s. So that's all that you really get on the Harkonnen side. And then that is pretty much the game. Okay, so that is Risk Dune. We'll just go into my pillars of review. Now I've not played the 4-player team game of this, only 2 players. I assume it would be fine. I played team games of the other ones I mentioned, Queen's Gambit and Star Wars Risk, and I really enjoyed those. I think it works well, and this is really very similar to especially Star Wars Risk Edition, and I really enjoyed the team game in that. So I expect it works well. 2-player game works great. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but I like that player count. Play time. Does the box say play time? I think it said somewhere on here. Well, it's about an hour. At most. I don't remember. I saw it somewhere. I think I said 45 minutes to an hour. That's totally right. It's a very quick game, unlike a normal game of Risk, which takes 2 years. This plays super quick. It's a very nice, quick, head-to-head filler type of game, but it's a lot of fun. So we'll get into my sort of 3rd pillar there, which is what is the game like? Well, I've already spoiled that a little bit by mentioning Star Wars Risk and Queen's Gambit. But, beyond that, it's like a lot of these sort of smaller 2-player games that are just like a quick, fun, head-to-head, just smash each other in the face kind of filler game. I mentioned some of the kind of weirdnesses with the rules. I think that could have been a little bit better cleaned up language and stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to mention was I saw some questions on Board Game Geek before I started recording this piece. You can't really see it, but these sieges that come into play for the Fremen player, they're actually divided. So the sieges that you start with, there's like 1 space, but these have 2 spaces, each with 4 troops each. So it's kind of like is it one group or is it two groups? I think it's just two separate groups so that you don't, when you get to siege in the game, you're not pushing like 8 troops in at once. So it's got to be 2 separate movements. So you're not just, because it would be quite a bit. So they're kind of like strangely labeled here, and it would just be a quick, easy clarification in the rulebook to say, hey, treat these as 2 separate sieges, but then when you respawn, you can put them whichever one you want anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So again, the rulebook could use a little bit of cleanup, but to me, it played very intuitively, very viscerally, and it was quick and snappy. But I just wish it was a little bit better cleaned up. And then it's kind of a cheap big box store game, but I don't think the price is cheap. I think it's like $50, which is like a little bit, I think, too much for this game, because the little plastic figures are pretty cheap. The card stock's cheap. The little Paul and Fade standees are cheap. Like it's not. This is the thing. Like I'm okay with that. Like it's perfectly fine. Like I said, I would actually recommend the game. I think it's a ton of fun. I think it's a little bit overpriced for what you're getting, because if you're going to pay that much, like you'd kind of want a little bit more. The board is cheap, like it's a little bit warpy, you know what I mean? Which can be easily fixed, but it warps a little easy. That kind of stuff. So it's just like, do I recommend this? Yeah, but I think it's like a $30 game, because I think that's fun. I think that's a good sort of entry gateway type of vibe. Like that's what this is, and it's a lot of fun. It's super fun, which I'll talk about now. But again, like you can't give me like almost premium prices and then no. That's not good. But let me talk about the gameplay though. So again, it's used that kind of tried and true formula with the 3 cards, reveal the cards, and then do them one at a time. And it's such a simple mechanic, but that little bit of like planning of like, okay, I know I can kind of keep these cards for later because maybe I haven't activated up the track and that kind of thing. And so I'll hang on to these, and then I'll use these other cards to kind of position. But the game is really kind of driven by that track. So the early game is getting some places in position with your troops to sort of plan out a kind of a route where you're going to try to get to Arakeen, or get to protecting Arakeen, or getting to Paul, and sort of getting to the sieges and sort of trapping them in that way. But then your capabilities don't really come online for either side until you spend some time, taking those vision or oppressor actions. There's a cool kind of like balancing act, because if you just, drive up the track, then you might be on your back foot, and you might be like playing a lot of recovery once you get up the track and you're able to spawn troops on either side of the game here. So there's an interesting sort of tick and tack between, okay, I need to get some technologies or troop, infestations, injections, versus, spending a turn just rolling 5 dice and moving 3 spaces up a track, when not really doing much with your turn or with that card. And that's pretty cool. But then once you start to unlock those technologies and you start to, the game feels like it has this sort of narrative acceleration where, sieges are getting bombarded, worms are coming out. You start to get the special abilities of the 2 Bene Gesserits that are on either side. And that adds to your choice. And none of the choices are like very, headache inducing, but there is choice there. And it's just a lot of fun because you're always rolling like a bunch of dice, 5 dice, 5 dice, 5 dice. And it's got some good little swings there, which are fun back and forth for this type of game. And then you have that real tension towards the end of the game where, maybe like a couple of sieges are destroyed, but now Atreides is coming down the lane to get to Arakeen, and he's got Gurney Halleck with him, and so he's just going to start laying waste because they have that sort of collective, skills and knowledge and just power of, the Atreides skills combined with the Fremen skills and all that stuff, and they start steamrolling. So the Harkonnen player has to be, again, balancing the troop movements and everything with those very risky, dreadnought attacks, because that's how you win the game. So you got to focus on that, because you're not going to win. Otherwise, the frame are just going to keep coming. So you got to start taking those out, but you don't want to like forsake those actions to, corralling and building walls of your troops in front of you, which again aren't going to respawn until you move up the track. So again, it's a good kind of back and forth sort of tug of war internally with what you're trying to do. But the game don't take forever. It takes 45 minutes or so. It's a lot of back and forth, really fun. So if you find this on sale, totally get it, because it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, if you're paying like premium for this sucker, I don't know. Because like, here's the thing, I'll leave it with this. The Star Wars Risk Edition, they had 2 editions of that. They had the cheap one like this. I can't remember what that costed. It was like $30. And now granted, it's like 8-9 years ago. But then after that, you could get the black edition, which was like little pewter minis and like just better components overall, better card stock and a little better cardboard components and all that stuff. And when that came out, it was like 30 or 40 bucks too. I think maybe it was 50. But if you're going to get 50 for that and then like 50 for this, I'm like, if this had upgraded components in some way, then I would say, yeah, that'd be good. But it's just a little tricky to recommend that when you're going to pay this much for a game, and it's just like really fun, really cool, especially if you like Dune. This is a great like easy Dune game that's still, I think, rewarding, and you're going to feel like the impact of it. But it's hard to recommend that with that component quality. The rule book sort of, it's not super clean. So anyway, you get what you get, but I still recommend it with some of those caveats if you can find a cheap one. Thanks.